Okie doke. Well, that's pretty. 18 and 22 is pretty good. So I think we'll get going, and there'll be a recording of this provided afterwards as well. So don't worry if you miss anything. You'll be able to catch up on it afterwards as well. So just to say hello, I'm sure all of you or most of you know me, Chris McEldowney, and now in the role as VP of Product at IRP Commerce, and I'm here with Michael Kern, our COO. So thank you very much to everyone for joining, and we're going to be sharing this presentation today. Bit of a combination of an overview of GDPR, and then I'll be stepping in to show you what we've done in the IRP and how you can use this to satisfy your compliance needs. So I'll let Michael kick off.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So we get to the next slide. So just by way of preamble, just to advise that we're not lawyers, and this is not intended in any way to provide legal advice. The responsibility for GDPR compliance lies with the retailer. That said, we have a central role to play in the online trading with the IRP platform, and we have looked at the market, we've looked at the regulations, we've looked at what people are saying, what analysts are saying, etc. online, and we thought it hopefully beneficial to you for us to provide and share some of those insights that we've come across. And hopefully that'll help you in your preparations for May 25th. Just by way of kind of outlining what we'll talk about, we'll just take a little bit of context first, just with the regulations themselves. We'll look at the IRP updates specifically for GDPR and what's been done there to help you be compliant, and then we'll look at kind of what you may want to consider doing next and some of the things you will have to do next. Okay, just by way of context then, this is for your convenience. These slides will be available immediately after the webinar. I assume everyone is familiar with the GDPR regulations already, but just for convenience, a few links to the regs themselves, the guide on the regs. There's a self-assessment on there. In addition to that, I think from a kind of sort of non-legal perspective, the key things to consider here are just from the online retailer's perspective, what is this substantially about? And it's about personal identification and sort of personal data generically, and consent by the user to give that. And I think from the online trading perspective, there's only, I suppose, two primary categories to consider there. One is financial transaction data, so data that's essential for you to perform your online retail function. And then there's marketing related data, and from what I can see in the market, that substantially focuses on the simple concept of subscribe and unsubscribe. And the reality is, there's not a huge amount of personal data held on the IRP, and that which is held tends to be used for one of those, well, has to be used for one of those two purposes. So what I've done to try and aid the process and for my own benefit is I've pulled together a little checklist. We can kind of flick into that now, I think. That checklist is really just me having a pass through the regulations, having a pass at what other online retailers are doing in the market, and I've focused on kind of bigger companies there like ASOS, Lathwaite's, etc., and what approach they're taking to achieve their compliance. In this checklist, so it kind of opens just by showing essentially what the customer's rights are. And if you look at those in relation to the IRP in your core online business, the right to be informed, well, the amount of data you hold and the type of data you hold isn't substantial, and it's very easy to provide access. It's very easy to kind of cater for all of these. Data portability isn't a major issue. Portability of an IP address or an email address is possibly not overly meaningful in this context. Right to erasure, important in relation to what can be erased and what can't. In relation to marketing, everything pretty much can. In relation to financial transaction data, you have overriding regulations, for instance, HMRC mandates that have to be satisfied. In terms of consent, this is probably one of the more important bits. Consent must be freely given, specific and informed, and the way companies are doing that seems to be around a combination of clarity in the consent request and also the, I think, quite clever use of privacy policy, and we'll talk to that a little bit further on. If we flick down to there's a couple of sections here where I just try and drill in a little bit. What does informed, specific and unambiguous mean? For instance, who you are as a retailer needs to be clear, but that can be included in the privacy policy, for example. In terms of the personal data, what you hold, we don't tend to hold location information, so name, IP address, those sorts of things, pretty straightforward. In terms of processing, we either process for financial transaction stuff or marketing. So again, relatively simple, we believe. Let's pick up a couple of minutes. Another one. Thanks. You need to be clear on why you need the personal data, and again, in our case, in the case of our clients, I think, to my mind, that's pretty simple. It's either for the financial transaction processing or for marketing. So consent to receive marketing in a generic sense is adequate from what I can see. Proof of consent, and Chris will talk later to kind of what we're doing on the IRP to kind of capture proof of consent information. But even for clients who have previously given consent, for instance, signed up to newsletter, that in itself is a form of proof of consent for you to deliver and send to them newsletter/marketing information of that guise. Reconsent is an area of careful consideration, which we'll talk to in more detail as we go through the presentation. But from what I can see, some retailers are adopting the approach that there isn't really a lot of reconsent required. Others are asking everyone to reconsent. I think for our clients that's probably overkill. I think in the majority of cases, from what I can see, we certainly have clear consent in relation to newsletter, etc. So ultimately, the approach to be taken is subject to you, the retailer's own sense of risk in relation to GDPR. But our view is that while some reconsent may be required, it's unlikely to be required across your entire customer base. And then other data points, GDPR contact has to be clear. We would recommend you use generic aliases like data controller at retailersname.com and avoid individuals, just so that alias can be monitored by multiple people and you have coverage when someone's on leave or traveling or whatever. Data erasure and rectification, again, I think separation between marketing and transaction data will be important. You really just need to focus on marketing from what I can see. And the ability to unsubscribe just needs to be simple and clear. Unsubscribe is different from erasure. Unsubscribe simply means don't send me those marketing broadcasts anymore. Erasure is more comprehensive. That's it. I would suggest everyone look at the ICO toolkit if you haven't already and have a skim of the regs. I mentioned earlier the clever use of privacy policy. I think from what I can see from what other retailers are doing, things like the retailer's identity in their GDPR contact can be in the privacy policy. They don't have to be in the request for consent or reconsent. What type of data you collect, and the data in the IRP isn't extensive as far as personal data goes, so that should be straightforward. And why you need the data, and to my mind that's essentially for ordering and delivery, and also to make the customer's experience better, make sure they get best value in terms of offers, etc. What you do with the data, how long you retain the data for, and that to my mind is essentially indefinitely until asked to remove it. or in the case of financial transaction data, that's down to regulatory requirements. So maybe for HMRC in the UK, that I believe is 6 years. And then in that privacy policy, just to explain what the customer's rights are, and again, that's pretty straightforward. Seems to be a fairly common approach taken in the market by various retailers. And to that end, we put together what we think is a useful sample privacy policy. Again, we're not supplying you with legal text per se. It's up to you to have that reviewed and validate for yourself that your GDPR compliance is solid and your privacy policy meets the requirements. So that's the context.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, we'll get back into the presentation now. Okay, so yes, in relation to that context, we've made a number of updates to the IRP to help you get ready for GDPR. And these are outlined below. Just going to run through these quickly, and then I'll give you a quick demo of how to use those. Firstly, we've added in full marketing consent on customer account creation. So before there were various options for this, but now we've now put this in as standard that all EU countries have to, people shipping or with billing details from EU countries, have to click an opt-in checkbox to receive marketing communications. So this can be toggled on and off on a country-specific basis, but we've set it up for you as default for all EU countries. So it's not set up for all international countries. That would be your choice whether you want to change those settings for international countries. That's detailed in the main GDPR article that we have in the IRP World, which there are links to within this presentation, and I'll be referring to throughout. So it's really just configuring that for your countries, and then you've got a small transition there, which I've specified the ID, which allows you to define exactly what consent you're requesting. We've also added in enhanced consent logs. So firstly, there's an explicit marketing consent flag which we've added in to email subscriptions. This is really it's mainly for this transition process because going forward, well, and for your international countries, it's a flag against the email subscription to say that they've given their specific consent, and we're also logging exactly when and how and what consent was given and via what method, what page on the IRP essentially, or how it was ungiven, how it was unsubscribed. So if a user clicks on an email to unsubscribe, that's then logged in the log against that customer email that they subscribed on such a date with such and such consent, and then they have unsubscribed at a later date. And that will then be accessible from the IRP admin, access to those logs. So those are the two core things that are now built into the IRP to enable you for GDPR compliance. Third thing then is the email placeholder, which is basically for you to use to regain consent where you deem it necessary to regain consent. So that placeholder, called Confirm Marketing Consent Link, has been added to the IRP email suite. And we've also added in mailing list segments, which group together customers who have not given explicit consent, so that you can then target these customers with email campaigns to re-request their consent. So I'm going to take you through now how to go about that. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. First of all, as I've said, it's important to update your country-specific settings and your text. So just let me slide into the IRP training site, and you'll see here I'm in the shipping countries shipping countries section. If you navigate to shipping country, and the example there I'd chosen when I was in France, but let's go for Belgium here. Edit this shipping country. And you'll see that we've added in the country-specific settings, along with your various postage messages, etc., these two options. And you'll see that I'm in Belgium, which is an EU country. So we've done this by default for you. This is show marketing sign up when creating an account. So this basically will show a tick box to ask for explicit consent when a customer is creating an account when they're purchasing from your website. This will show the tick box along with a piece of small text, which is small translation ID 2662. Again, this is detailed in this presentation and in the various articles. So it will show this tick box, and the second option here is to say whether you want that tick box ticked or unticked. For GDPR regulations for EU customers, that must be initially unticked because you're asking for opt-in. But you may decide for international customers, for example, that you want it to be opt-in by default. Again, choices here is yours, but we've left you with those options. But as default for EU countries, we've set it up in line with GDPR compliance. So that's what you need to do. Just check those. As I say, your EU countries are done, but you may want to toggle these settings for other international countries. That's the first thing to look up. Next most important thing is, again, Michael's referred to this, but it's updating your privacy policy. So you've updated your country settings, so you're getting consent in the right manner, and then you're going to update your privacy policy. Again, we're not lawyers here, so we're not able to provide legal advice, but we've done a good review of all requirements, and we've put suggestions in place which I hope will help you. I hope we help you give a bit of guidance. An example, there's an article you'll find on the IRP World called Templates and Tips for Communicating with Your Customers, published last week. And in here, you'll see a little note on privacy policy and a link to the privacy policy that is sitting on the demo machine. So again, this is really an update to this to show what kind of information you should be putting in your privacy policy, and some of this does relate directly to what we're storing in the IRP. So it basically ticks those boxes that Michael referred to in his checklist on privacy policy. So please take a look at that as a reference, but not legal guidance. That's the privacy policy, really ensuring you're collecting consent correctly going forward, fundamental for GDPR, and that's what we've done for you there. And then on your side, updating your privacy policy to ensure you're being explicitly telling customers what data you're collecting, who you are, why you're collecting it, etc. So those are your real fundamentals. Point 3 here. Sorry, I keep jumping ahead. Point 3 here is regarding your current email list. So this is the one that a lot of questions have been asked over. And basically, again, summarized in our main GDPR article, you've got 3 choices here. As Michael said, you can assume that GDPR is going to be extremely strict, and you want to make sure you're bang up to date on the regulation and the laws, and assume that you've got either, and in this case, assume you've got no consent from everybody and re-ask it. We see that as a little bit extreme. On the other hand, you can assume you've got consent from everybody. Now, a number of clients we've spoken to may well be proceeding down this route just because they're confident in their procedures and that they've done this. And then there's a middle ground, which is I've got some consent, and that's basically from our data analysis, we're in the IRP able to prove where customers have signed up to your mailing list via the IRP at a specific date and time. And for us, this is a good indicator. This is a good indicator of consent, and we can provide you with the data on which exact customers have done this. These will be run by reports from by your account manager or your support team. So you've got three real options there. Assume you've got consent from everyone, assume you've got no consent and re-request it from everyone, or take a middle ground and assume you've got consent, or we think the data proves that out and that you haven't got it where we can't find proof within the data, and then re-request from those segments. So that's a company decision on your side, really. But I'm going to show you what we've put in place to help you with that now. So basically what we've done here, if you look into email campaigns, I'm in our training site again, and in an email template to communicate to the customer to request their consent. And the main update here we've provided templates, and I'll touch on this in a minute, but the main update we've done here is add in this confirm marketing consent placeholder. So this allows you to use the IRP email marketing suite to add in those links to confirm marketing consent, set up campaigns that go out to your customer base, and re-request consent. And anybody that clicks on your big green button will be logged then as having given explicit consent. And again, as I mentioned before, the approach to this can be send this to everybody, assume nobody's given consent, send it to nobody because you assume you've got consent already, or send it to a segment of your email list. And regarding that segment, if you go into the recipient section, you'll notice that we've set up on your IRP for you two mailing list segments. One which is all customers without explicit marketing consent, so that's worldwide, anybody who hasn't given explicit consent, and two EU customers without explicit marketing consent, so that you can take a choice there and you can target users appropriately. Currently your IRP will be set up so that you have no consent from anybody in these lists. So the explicit consent flag will be set to false, essentially. What we've done is we've set up scripts and reports that the account managers and the support team can run for you to analyze your database and give you an estimation of how many of your customers you think have given explicit consent, and then we can update that flag for you. And but we will request your authorization to do so. We can update that flag for you so that some of your customers, this flag will be toggled and they will be deemed as having given explicit consent, and that others will remain without explicit consent. And then you can target these to be requested. And so as you target these mailing lists, segments, as customers or subscribers give consent, then they will be removed from these segments. So these segments will be the more with your first email campaign, and then you're probably likely want to do a follow-up 1 or 2 email campaigns. These segments will gradually reduce. So for example, in this example, this is my training platform, so I've got a couple of customers. I've got 2 recipients who have not given explicit consent. I'm going to preview my template. Again, these templates are available and referenced via the articles to help you out. And I'm going to send that email. I happen to know that the 2 customers are myself. So I'm going to receive an email now as soon as that goes out. And as soon as I get it, and I click on the consent button, then we'll see that this has been updated. Just gotta wait for 35 seconds then for the schedule to send. So this slide just summarizes what I've talked through here for your reference. Setting up your template, and then a link out to the templates and the article which explains. I'll just get into that while we're waiting for the email. This article here, templates and tips for communicating with customers. Again, privacy policy and email templates. And we've created 2 templates for you, and this little PDF here, which you can download by clicking, just dissects the templates and explains why we've written as we have. With clear call to action, good title lines, headers, etc. So best practice emailing there. So that's all provided. That's all provided for you. So you select your template, use that, select your mailing list segment. Again, prior to doing this, obviously first steps, update your privacy policy and talk to your account manager for updating that explicit marketing consent flag. You'll have heard a beep on my machine. I've just received my emails. I'm going to put that on the screen for you now. Bear with me while I toggle between the screens. So that's the email I've just received. Again, important things, important notice, wanting to make sure that we get the opens on this email. And again, using personal information where we have it. Chris, we need to decide. This is template 1 of 2, which has got 2 options. Don't necessarily need the unsubscribe option in there. This one, yes, I want the latest offers. So I'm going to click on that. Now that's opened it up on another screen. Drag this in here for you. So then that takes the customer to their email subscription preferences page, and with confirmation that they still want to hear from you. So that is me having given explicit consent. And if we go back into my email, campaign, if I toggle out of this list and back into it, we'll see that number is now updated to 1. So my mailing list segment has been updated because one of the users there gave consent. So I no longer need to mark it to them to re-request consent. Again, they're ticked off. Okay. And as I've mentioned, our expectation is if you're requesting consent that you have to be prepared for losing a decent amount of your mailing list, because people naturally will miss emails, not open them. Open rates will be low. If you use a template, it should help you get them higher, but you'll naturally be expecting it'll be a weeding out of your mailing list. So you may want to send a couple of attempts at this, potentially with an offer, although there's slight maybe. There's differing recommendations over that within the text we've read, whether consent is. I think as long as it's explicit, you're good. But there's certain things we've read that say offering incentives to give consent is not full best practice. I'm not sure if you have an opinion on that, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. I think the emphasis is on freely given. So it's not that it's wrong to make an offer. That's valid as long as you're not gaining consent kind of under the radar, as it were, that people are looking to take the offer. They have to still explicitly tick a box. You can't use a pre-tick box. They've got to explicitly take an action to consent. But including an offer is valid. Some analysts say it's cleaner not to. Other retailers are doing it. So I would suggest, and I'll tally up yourselves, but take the selfish approach. We're in the online trading business, and anything that optimizes trading is good, as long as it isn't a flagrant breach of regulations. And I think with the guidance we've given here, hopefully, on your own kind of research into the area and satisfying yourselves, I think it should be possible to certainly retain a lot of the existing customers you have where they have given consent before, explicitly to newsletter, for instance. It should be possible to attract a high percentage, an adequate percentage anyway, of re-consents where that's required. And also, I know from my own personal experience, there are sites that I know I won't re-consent to because I just don't buy from them anymore. I may have bought one purchase once in my life, and maybe some form of a slight clean out isn't a bad thing either. But yeah, I think in relation to offers, again, as long as the consent is freely given, that's everything.
Yeah, and we'll monitor how for those companies that have decided to re-seek consent, how that's going, and we may look to introduce a couple of automatic offer things in there if it'll help out. So by all means, let us know if you think that'll be something you'd like to use, and we can see if we can get that developed for you. That's it really on the next steps. The final one obviously is if you've decided to reconfirm before, then the action before May 25th or on May 25th is to unsubscribe those users that haven't given explicit consent. If that's the route you're going down to, and again, we can do that in bulk for you upon request.
On the conclusions, then, legally the GDPR compliance does lie with you, the retailers, but in practice, when you dig into it and you look at what's stored in the IRP, what you use that data for, etc., it really is just a case of making the text updates for clarity for the most part. I don't see GDPR compliance being an overly complicated thing. I don't see it being a big work burden on you. Obviously satisfy yourself that final wording meets compliance requirements, but to help with that, we've provided sample privacy policy, the email templates, etc., and the basis upon which your clients have previously consented should be pretty clear when you go through the exercise online that on the back end that Chris has described. So all in all, I'd be hopeful that your distribution lists remain impactful as far as trading goes. And then to help with that, clearly, some of the pieces provided there, the IRP now being updated to help you with that GDPR compliance, giving you the capabilities you need. Re-consent request not required if requirements already met. That would be the case. To my mind, that would be the case if someone signed up for the newsletter. You need to check that for yourselves, but I think that's a good starting point. Design templates provided to try and optimize re-consent rate. I think that's important. We've looked at a variety of other retailers, and we've deliberately waited until now to see what appears to be good practice and what looks like it would work well, and then we've tried to take the best of what we've seen and provide those in the templates. And then from just general kind of look at the regs and industry observations, we pulled together that checklist. Hopefully that helps, and specifically the sample privacy policy to try and get you a head start on your final wording on the privacy policy. So hopefully all of that can reduce your workload in relation to GDPR compliance and give you comfort around what needs to get done between now and the 25th of May.
Okay, and then I'll just show you on screen. We've added, there are links throughout this presentation, but then just specifically links to the IRP World articles I've been referring to there are in the presentation as well, and the IRP checklist. I just wanted to show you, ensure you're all aware of these, because there is a lot of detail in here, especially this one, GDPR and getting ready for the May 25th. This has, if you read this a month ago, there have been updates since based off the explicit development that we've done. So there's a lot more detail in there, defining how we are defining who's an EU country subscriber, for example, and then around a lot more detail around the 3 choices I highlighted. So please refer to that as your reference. And again, the choice you have and the step-by-step changes you should take them. So that is all deeply documented in this article. And again, you've got your templates article we've referred to. We've got Michael's checklist there. Dan's also written an article on that in there, which is linked out to. You've got your example privacy policy. And then you've got your fairly simple, as Michael says, steps that you need to carry out to make sure you're up to speed.
In relation to things like the checklist, or maybe specifically the checklist, that's a kind of collation, a kind of centralized perspective as you go through your GDPR preparations. If you want and see benefit in adding to that checklist, if you ask questions about it, or you want anything amended in it or corrected in it from your perspective, feel free to send those through to me. We would like to evolve that, not just based on our observations, but yours as well. So, in the interest of the overall IRP community and community of retailers, if you do have any feedback on it, please provide it, and we'll evolve that as rapidly as possible over the next couple of weeks.
And that's really it from us there. There's the live chat there if anybody wants to write a chat, or if you want to turn on your microphone and shout out, by all means say hello and ask any questions you may have. And of course, as Michael says, you're welcome to email myself or Michael with any observations, questions, or updates. A question. Thank you, Kerry. Where can we see the enhanced consent logs in there? Good question, Kerry. So that is currently, we're reviewing them with reports, but it's currently under development, and they will be available from the in your email profile and subscriber lists in the IRP, where you currently access your subscriber information. We'll be adding in a view on those logs there into the IRP. That is under development at the minute, and will be released for you before the 25th of May, so that you're able to view those logs going forward. Thanks, Gary.
Any other questions?
Thanks for that, Pete. Do we need to email our customers regarding the new privacy policy?
You don't need to email them regarding the privacy policy if they've already given consent, and with every marketing communication you need, in the ideal state, to include a link to the privacy policy. That's part of the clarity piece. And if for the subset of customers on your distribution list for whom you seek re-consent, and you'll see it in the template we've provided, there will be a clear link to the privacy policy. So that clear link makes the privacy policy an integral part of that communication, and that appears to be adequate from what I can see other retailers doing. Hope that answers the question.
Psychos UK, thanks. Do we need to update cookie notices to make the consent more explicit? As far as we've seen, no. So your cookie, you'll notice in that template privacy policy that it links out to a template cookie policy as well. So it's really just to make sure that your cookie policy, again, on that page is easily accessible and up to date, and that template contains the cookie information you need to provide there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in conjunction with that, if in the what data do you store, if you explicitly indicate cookie source data or cookies or whatever the terminology is, you'll see it skim through a few other retailer sites, Jimmy Choo and whatever the big retailers are. They'll have taken a lot of legal advice, and there's a lot of similarity in the approach being taken. So I think that seems to be adequate from what I can see.
Thanks for those. Any others?
Well, it's almost 1:45. We'll wait a minute or two for any further questions if anyone thinks of any. Otherwise, we'll let you back to your busy trading days and generating revenue on the IRP. Okay, we've no other questions coming through, so we'll wrap it there for today. Please do get in touch. Any feedback, any observations you have as you research this area, any steps you need to take, any clarifications, whatever. It's important we do what we can to help between now and the 25th, and we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day, folks. Cheers.
Bye.